Alright, so we're about halfway there. So if you do want to check any of these Ash War highlights to kind of see like how they function with different weapon types, I do have that. I did make a playlist, so you're welcome to check that out on my channel. So the next one that we're covering is Eruption. I do like this Ash War quite a bit. I think it's just a slam down and then a slam back up. And it does have like a unique property where it does create magma, and that's pretty cool. So I found out that if you do land the first part of the Ash War like fully, it could combo into the part where it slams it back up and do quite a bit of damage. And because there's magma on the floor, it does do quite a bit of like tick damage around. So it's actually really good. So in terms of difficulty in landing the Ash War, again, this is another of those situational Ash Wars where if you do know your enemies coming at you, you could use it for trades. It does have a lot of hyper armor. I honestly think this Ash War, surprisingly, for like how long the animation is, because you're doing the slam down and the slam up, it is surprisingly safe. And I think the reason why is because of the magma on the floor. So you're pretty safe as long as you stay within your Ash War, the magma, because it won't hurt you. So that's pretty nice. In terms of damage, the magma doesn't do a lot, just like good tick damage. But if you do land, you know, the full combo of the slam down, the slam up with the magma ticks after, it does do quite a bit of damage. And because it does combo into itself, it is pretty good. I would honestly put it at a B. Probably make an argument for it being at A, considering it combos into itself and it leaves a trail of magma, which is pretty good. But I feel like because this Ash War is pretty like, you know, niche in terms that its main role is to like trade or like hit trade, take trades, tank hits, make full use of its hyper armor, I'll probably put it at B, because it's probably not as spammable as like all of these up here. Again, you could probably make an argument for that. So next up is Warcry. So this is a buff for yourself, and it changes your heavy of your weapon to a unique charge attack. Some where you just charge forward, and others where you kind of do like a stab to the ground from like jumping in the air. You can check out the Ash War highlight. I did put 2 parts because it does work on so many weapons. Just in itself, it's a buff. It does make you a little stronger, so that in itself, it's great in its own. And plus, the benefits are giving you hyper armor when you do use your charge attacks. And I do particularly enjoy like the twin blade version, where you do like a jump in the air and a thrust. I think that's really good for roll caching when you do get in that situation. So in terms of landing the Ash War, I think it's fairly hard depending on which one you use. If you do commit to the charge where you like kind of run forward a bit, you do have to do the whole entire like running forward animation and then the slam, so you're pretty stuck at traveling a certain amount of distance. That's why I do prefer the one where you do use the halberd or like thrusting weapon, so you do pounce in the air and then stab the ground. I think that's really good. How safe is the Ash War? That depends on which one you use, I guess. Again, there's the 2 different versions of it, but the damage for it is really high, especially if you do have the right talismans and you do have the Highland Axe. You could get a lot of damage, potentially like over 75% of someone's health. So overall, I do think it's really good, but I do want to keep it probably as an A. It's really good, but there are other Ash Wars that do similar things that I feel are a little better. So next one is Phantom Slash. So out of all of the Ash War highlights that I've done, I will say 100% confidently that doing the Phantom Slash one was probably my favorite. I think of how versatile this Ash War is, and even if you get hit mid animation, that your Phantom still comes out and could potentially hit them. Like, that's amazing. So in terms of difficulty in landing the Ash War, I think because the Phantom does auto track to your enemy, and if you are familiar with the range of how far your Phantom goes, you could more than likely land a hit since it comes out pretty quick and it's just a moving hitbox. And it does have a follow-up, so if you are like really close to your enemy and you kind of preemptively, queue up for the follow-up, even if you get hit out of it, it still comes out and could hurt the enemy. So that's amazing. So next is talk about how safe the Ash War is. It is probably really safe. Because sure, you could probably lock onto your enemy and you do your phantom and then you follow up with yourself. But when I use it, I like to use it more so like a projectile. So I would lock onto my enemy, have my phantom go forward and lunge at them. Then my own character, I would like free aim and then like go a different direction. So I don't have to like commit to going in and getting potentially like blundered. And this way of using it is also good for like not only dodging like projectiles or like going to a bad situation, but also is great for like hitting multiple enemies at the same time. You can like target multiple enemies, one from like locking onto one side to where an enemy is at, and then maybe if they're behind you, you could just free aim towards them and lunge yourself. Overall, I love Phantom Slash. Damage is also pretty good if you do land most of these hits. And yeah, so this is probably very biased on my part. I love it a lot. I'm actually gonna put it at the very top. I like Phantom Slash so much. Next up is Spectral Lance. So Spectral Lance is considered like an occult affinity Ash of War, so the damage does scale off your arcane. The tracking for it, it's pretty good. It doesn't do a lot of damage, and you can't really like spam it over and over. You have to like reset the animation when you are doing the Ash of War. So in terms of difficulty for landing it, if you're in like a stealth situation, you could probably hit a person from really far away. But that's probably like the only few times you probably could use it or land it. If you're like in the actual fight in close combat, it's kind of hard to just combo into it. In terms of how safe it is, I guess it could be pretty safe because it's the projectile, but the damage for it is very minimal. So I don't know. I want to put it personally at like D or C. Like one day I could feel like I want to put it at D. Like I think it's better than Spinning Weapon. But I also could see it being at C because, if you do want to use it just as a projectile, it does its job. It's it's fairly low cost. It does take a lot of stamina though. So in terms of like PvP and invasion, it's good for like, picking off that one time. But if you do want to do a lot of damage in a stealth situation, you'd rather just use something else. So I will probably put it in the high D. No, I'll put it at C. At the very end of C. Again, I could see this being at D or C. I just want to put it at C right now. Maybe if we don't have enough D's, I'll just throw it down there in the future. But for now, I'll just leave it at C. Next up is Golden Land. This falls into that archetype that's similar to Earthshaker, where you slam on the ground and you do have a follow-up. But I do think Golden Land is a better version of Earthshaker. You not only have that ground explosion that's really good, but you also have projectiles that form afterwards and homes onto your enemies that you locked on. So I think that's always a good plus. It's just a better version of Earthshaker, so I would just, easily I'll just put it up here. Probably at, behind Stormblade. So in terms of difficulty in landing, it is, again, a hit trading beast, but it does have the benefit of having projectiles, so you could also spam this at a far range, although the FP usage is probably not worth doing that, but you could use it as a more of a range projectile. And I guess that kind of crosses over with how safe it is to use. Again, it has the ground explosion, so you have to respect it. It has projectiles, so you can't always just swing and attack the enemy. You have to be aware that the projectiles are also going to hit the enemy. So overall, it's a great Ash of War. Right, so next up is Piercing Fang. I do enjoy this Ash of War. I especially like using it as a roll catcher. So in terms of difficulty in landing it, it's fairly okay. It lunges pretty far forward, so you could catch people off guard. And also it's really good, again, as a roll catch. And if you do panic roll out of it, you could just follow it up with another Piercing Fang. So it's not that hard to land it. In terms of how safe it is, if you do use it and you're just one enemy, it's pretty good. But just because, again, we're trying to think about it like as an invasion standpoint or like combat ordeal, just if you do go in there and you whiff or you do hit one person, you are pretty stuck in the animation for it for a little bit. and because of how far you lunge forward, it could be bad, but it's not the worst. Therefore, it definitely is going to be higher, and I probably will put it at an A, somewhere like right there. So next up we do have Bloodblade. So this is different from the Reduvia's version where you don't hurt yourself, but I do find that this Bloodblade has areas where it's better than the Reduvia's version. It comes from the Ashwar taking less stamina, so you can spam it more often. I forget if the FP cost is different for both of them, but I think the main difference was just that you could spam a lot more of the Ashwar Bloodblade than the Reduvia's one, and I think that's pretty important to note. So in terms of difficulty to land, it is a projectile, so it does have similarities to Stormblade. The further you are, it is harder to land. The closer they are, the easier it is to land. The difference is that Bloodblade, you could proc bleed, so that's always good to have. How safe it is fairly safe. It's a projectile. So honestly, I would put it at an A. Damage is pretty low. There is like the cost of, you hurting yourself that one time, and it's not as fluid as like Stormblade where you can you swing, then do Stormblade, swing, Stormblade, but I still think that it's really good. Now I definitely put it at an A. I'm okay with putting it at the end, but I do think it deserves to be up here. I think it's pretty good. So next up is Carian Grandeur. I think this Ashwar is a better version of another one that we'll probably cover in the future, where it charges up 2 or 3 times, so it becomes very large and has a decent amount of range. It does take quite a bit of FP and stamina when you do use it, but that's the trade-off for how much damage comes off of it. And there's many ways to buff it, so there's a lot of one-shot potential. So in terms of difficulty for landing, if you are locked onto to an enemy, I do think it's fairly hard to land, especially because it's pretty telegraphed, because you are charging it up, you're holding it right on top of you. I think where this shines is just through it being able to go through walls. Yeah, it's pretty far range, so you could get even get people vertically. I don't think it's the safest Ashwar, because if you do charge all the way, in this scenario you do miss it, it does take a lot of stamina. So if they're rolling into you, being aggressive, depending on your stamina, you might not be able to roll away and you're just always going to eat a hit, and you could be in a bad scenario when you're trying to roll away from them. And then in terms of damage, we mentioned this earlier, the damage is crazy high. There's a lot of ways to buff it, so because of that, I would put it at a B. So I think the best way to probably describe this is high risk, high reward. If you do land it, you have a chance of potentially one-shotting people, depending on what rune level you use it on. So it's pretty insane. Just that if you do miss, you have to, face the high risk that comes with it. So next up is Lion's Claw. So this is just you doing a flip, and you're doing a slam with your sword. So this Ashwar does do a lot of damage, but in my Ashwar highlight, I did find that it was not as easy to land as I thought. There's just these little situations that make this Ashwar just whiff really bad. So sometimes if the enemy does walk in a little closer and is within that flip range, you can sometimes just brush past them and just whiff entirely, which is very infuriating because that commitment of that flip is pretty high. So in terms of difficulty in landing it, it's okay. Some things that make it very hard to land, I just mentioned. So in terms of how safe it is, I'll say it's okay. I think because it's a slam forward, so enemies sometimes do respect it. They just, roll back. But if you do you just whiff it entirely, it could be bad because you are lunging yourself forward. You could get blendered. And also if you misjudge the distance, you could just clip into their hurt box and whiff the move right next to them. But it's still a pretty good Ashwar because of how much damage you do and also how much hyper armor you do have on it. So there are some good and there are some bads for it. Overall, I'll put it at a B. I like it. I respect it. Flips are cool. I think I'll put it right there. So next up is Prayerful Strike. I thought this was going to be the archetype of Eruption, and I was looking forward to it. But when I actually used the Ashwar, it was not that. Let's talk about the good parts of it. I do like that if you do land a hit, you do get, you know, your HP back. So that's great for lifesteal builds. And you do have a decent amount of hyper armor. And then the bad part is that the windup for where you actually slam, you know, your weapon down, not only is it so telegraphed, but also takes quite a bit. Like in my Astral Warrior highlight, I think on the last invasion, there were like 2 times where I knew where the enemy was going to come in and attack me, right? And they're pretty far away. So normally other like hit trading like Astral Wars, that's where, you know, that's where your time to strike. And that's where you could usually get the trade and get a lot of reward. But for some reason with Prayerful Strike, like the swing down takes so long where the enemy did have enough time to hit me or whiff, and they just rolled away. Overall, I do find it very hard to land. But I guess that does make it balanced because you are healing from the hit. So I guess that's one way to balance it. How safe is the Astral War? It's a long commitment in the animation, so I don't think it's entirely safe. If you do land the Astral War, then that does make it safe because, you know, you're getting the hits on you and you do hit them, so you do heal up. So I guess in terms of that, it is pretty safe. But if you do miss it, you're just taking a hit for no reason. And the damage is, it's okay. It's like medium okay, you know? Honestly, I want to put this down here. Like, I think the effects for it are so cool that you're healing off the hit. But man, just like the name, you know, the name says, it's a prayerful strike. You got to pray for it to land. So that's going to be down there. So next, last but not least, is Loretta Slash. I do enjoy Loretta Slash, mainly because it does combo into itself. If you do get the first part of the swing, you could land the second part. Unfortunately, it is, you know, pretty committal, and it has a decent amount of end lag. Like, honestly, if I'm just basing it off on, like, you know, the scythe, right, and you do the true combo, I would put it up here in S or an A. But because of how it functions with other weapons, you can't really get that true combo. And because of how much damage that does come out from it, I would put it as a B. It's still pretty good because if you do land the first hit, it'll be pretty nice. And if you do land the first hit and you know there's someone behind you, you could free aim it and have it hit someone else. So you could keep yourself relatively safe in terms of landing it. If you land the first part, you will usually land the second part. It's just getting that first initial hit. If you miss, it's pretty bad, but luckily it does have pretty, you know, wide hitboxes. So you could make yourself safe in terms of that. So, and the damage is, again, fairly decent. Therefore, it's at the end of B. You could probably make an argument for it being at C. I don't see it being any higher than B. But yeah, there's not really much to say about Loretta Slash. If it didn't combo into itself, I'll probably put it lower. But because if you do get the first strike, you could get the follow-up of the animation. So I think that's pretty decent. Alright, so that's all 22 Astral Wars that I've covered so far. We'll probably revisit this in the future when we get another 11 or 22. So hope you have enjoyed this video. This was a longer one, or maybe it was a short one, depending on whether I make this to 2 parts or not. Gotta say the outro, so if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Catch you in the next video.